When you think of anime horror, for most people, it typically revolves around blood, gore, or perhaps yet another creepy ghost story. But there's a whole other side to the genre, and that is Lovecraftian horror. This genre builds tension slowly, pulling you into the story that leaves you unsettled by the unknown, and things you just can't comprehend as you proceed, instead of relying on shock value or blood splatter like most horror does. So, stick around till the end as we uncover 11 such gems that redefined what retro horror truly means. And who knows, you might just find the perfect addition to your next horror marathon watchlist. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Wicked City, 1987. Wicked City, directed by Yoshiaki Kawajiri, was, at the time of its release and remains, one of the more controversial movie titles that plunges straight into the classic Lovecraftian zone of the eerie, unknown abyss. Set in a world where a fragile peace treaty exists between Earth and the Black World, the story follows human agent Taki Rinzaburo and the Black World agent, Meiki. Their mission is to protect a 200-year-old mystic diplomat who holds the key to renew this truce. However, things spiral into chaos as interdimensional treaties and dark forces try to hinder the renewal of the truce, making it clear that the boundaries between the realms are far thinner than was imagined. What really sets the Wicked City apart is the way it blends different genres together to deliver a masterpiece in visual chemistry. On the one hand, it has a dark, noir-inspired action film vibe going on, while also incorporating urban landscapes and action sequences. Additionally, the way Wicked City toys with perception elevates the entire storytelling, as we see people suddenly morph into monstrous beings and environments shift in nightmarish ways. It all feels like a long, twisted fever dream. The slow, creeping feeling of dread that nothing that is seen is real makes you question everything, which in turn creates an unsettling tension that doesn't involve jump scares, but rather existential dread. The film, apart from its horror element, created ripples, shocking people with its bold and raunchy scenes. There's a constant back and forth between gruesome horror and erotic moments, sometimes happening at the same time. Critics and fans debated its extreme violence and disturbing depictions of women, but it's also probably this very daring approach that made it a cult classic. Demon City Shinjuku, 1988. Another epic Lovecraftian anime by Yoshiaki Kawajiri. Demon City Shinjuku is considered by many critics and fans to be a must-watch, with some even going so far as calling it an epitome of anime. Despite what the titles might suggest, Wicked City and Demon City Shinjuku aren't related at all. Set in a post-apocalyptic setting, the movie takes place in a city overtaken by demonic forces. Kyoya, a young martial artist who also possesses psychic abilities, needs to save his town from the snare of the evil sorcerer, Rebi Ra, who has plans to destroy it. Staying true to the Lovecraftian theme, the distinct line between reality and illusion now blurs and stretches across the entire city, which itself becomes a source of nightmare, with buildings warping, streets twisting, and nothing feeling constant. The viewer is left in a helpless state, wondering whether what they're seeing is real, or if it will change into something else entirely. And to be honest, that's precisely what makes this anime so exciting. When the movie was released, the audience's reactions were mixed. Fans did love the fast-paced action sequences, stunning visuals, and the post-apocalyptic scenery with horror around every corner. But the critics were divided in their opinions, with some feeling the story felt a bit too overstuffed and not enough character development was happening. The graphic violence, which was way over the top, felt unnecessary. But despite it all, the film went on to become a cult favorite among the fans of the genre because of the way it perfectly embodied the theme of the genre, be it the urban transformation brought about by the demonic forces, humanity's incapacity to protect itself from the supernatural invasion, or the general theme of apocalyptic dread that prevails throughout the entire film. Demon City leaves a lasting impression in true Lovecraftian style. Angel's Egg, 1985, standing at the number 3 spot on our list today, is one of the most visually haunting entries in Lovecraftian anime. Mamoru Oshii directed Angel's Egg. The film follows the story of a mysterious young girl that wanders the desolate city, set in the post-apocalyptic era, holding onto a large egg. On her journey, she comes across a man who is not named, who starts following her, intrigued by her, and her egg. The two try to understand the purpose of the egg and what to do with it, whilst the rest of the world remains crumbling as it did before. What makes the movie all the more haunting is the eerie silence that follows throughout the movie, with almost little to no dialogue. The silence, though scary, seems suitable though, and matches the overall tone of the movie, and leaves the viewers with a profound sense of dread. The film, considering there are no heavy dialogues, conveys most of the content through symbolism that sets the movie apart from the typical mainstream narrative style of storytelling. The overall sense of dread that the film brings with itself, with the looming shadows, the empty and strewn streets, create an unsettling feeling of isolation, which, though symbolically, could answer why the egg was being so much importance. Upon its release, most were frustrated by the open-ended, abstract narrative of the movie, but critics and fans did appreciate the dreamlike quality the movie had, that refused to provide concrete answers, making it a quintessential Lovecraftian work in anime, demonstrating that horror doesn't always need monsters to be considered eerie. Sometimes, it can also exist in mystery, isolation, and the fear of unknown. Space Runaway Ideon, 1980. From the surface, it might just come off as another mecha anime, with the typical giant robots coming to the rescue and saving the day for everyone. But Space Runaway Ideon flips the mecha genre and steers it straight into the Lovecraftian anime genre. After their colony is wiped out in a sudden alien attack, the survivors discover Ideon, a mecha with no backstory of how it got there. As the story unfolds, the Ideon, instead of being the ultimate weapon of hope, feels more like a malevolent force that is out of control, rampaging to destroy everything in its path, regardless of who gets hurt in the process. And this is where things take a turn into the unknown and uncertain realm. The hidden symbolism in Space Runaway Ideon lies in how the Ideon itself represents alien technology that is so advanced that it surpasses human understanding, that gauging its destructive power and controlling it is just not possible. Looking at it from today's lens, especially in 2025 with AI rapidly evolving, the parallel feels even more chilling, with the unsettling thought of how quickly machines can turn on humanity once control slips away, makes the deeper meaning of the movie all the more daunting. Although the movie was not well received at the time of its release, with most people finding it a bit too bleak and unsettling, over time, it has earned a spot as one of the best mecha anime movies out there, with just a touch of Lovecraftian terror. Neon Genesis Evangelion, 1995 to 1996. Another entry from the mecha anime genre, Neon Genesis Evangelion mixes giant robots with cosmic horror in a post-apocalyptic setting. What can possibly go wrong? Everything. Humanity is facing a threat from mysterious beings known as angels, whose motives remain unclear. No matter how advanced humans get, the angels always seem one step further. The story follows teenage pilots like Shinji, who's tasked with controlling giant mechas called Evangelions to fight these angels. Characters are constantly left questioning themselves, their purpose, and the meaning of existence, while the angels' attacks continue posing a threat to erase humanity entirely. What follows is a stark reminder of just how small humans stand in the grand scheme of things, and that reality is something that is deeply unsettling to come to terms with. While the audience loved the drama and intense action, most found parts of it bleak and confusing, largely because perhaps too much was left ambiguous. It earns its spot on this list today because of the way the horror isn't just limited to the angels, but also raises a mirror to the unknown possibility of just what else might exist that's beyond our understanding and control. And that is a scary thought. The Dark Myth, 1990. The Dark Myth is one of those underrated anime that doesn't get talked about much, but totally deserves a spot on our list. The storyline of the anime revolves around the premise that ancient mythological forces, which have existed since before humanity began, are awakening and bringing with them prophecies of the world's end. From the very start, the anime sets a very bleak tone, which is a mix of doom, desperation to save humanity, and the constant struggle to try and understand the forces at work. It beautifully blends Japanese mythology with cosmic horror so seamlessly that what comes out feels like pure Lovecraftian genius. Throughout the anime, there's this unsettling sense that, while fictional, the warnings and prophecies it carries might not be too far from reality, and that the nightmares it depicts could very well be what's lying in wait for us. The characters keep stumbling onto secrets that reveal the illusion they had about the world, and how it is, in fact, nothing but a thin cover that is hiding something far darker. That constant reminder of how small we are and never truly in control is exactly what makes it so perfectly Lovecraftian. Upon its release, it didn't get the same recognition as other big titles, with many finding the narrative painfully boring and slow. Yet, in some ways, that's exactly what makes it so special, and an excellent underrated addition to our list. Although the film does have its graphic moments, beyond the mainstream tentacled horror or blood and gore, there also exists anime like this, which takes horror to a whole another dimension, with the uneasy feeling that maybe humanity is nothing but a pawn in a twisted game. Urotsukidoji, Legend of the Overfiend, 1987 to 1989. If there's one anime that got its own share of bad rep and controversy, it is Hideki Takayama's Urotsukidoji, Legend of the Overfiend. The story roughly revolves around the convergence of three realms: the human world, the demon world, and the man-beast world, as the prophecies predict the coming of the Chojin, a godlike entity destined to bring about either salvation or absolute mayhem. What follows is the distortion of reality as otherworldly forces take over. While the anime is definitely a Lovecraftian gem, that's not really what most people remember it for. What stuck out instead was the extreme violence and graphic erotic horror pushed to a level rarely seen in anime at the time. The anime, which was a perfect amalgamation of gore, body horror, and some pretty disturbing imagery, made it infamous, even leading it to be banned in some countries. The overall reaction from the audience was polarized, with some calling it just plain obscene, while some saw it as a twisted fusion of horror and mythology, albeit presented in a bit of an exploitative artistry. All in all, most people agreed that the anime effectively embodied the Lovecraftian terror, combined with a touch of erotic horror, presented in a very raw, no-limits approach. The way, it wasn't just the grotesquely in-your-face imagery that remained with the audience, but also the daunting feeling of approaching doom by means of the prophecies that highlighted the fact that no matter what we humans do to protect ourselves, we're powerless to stop and defend against the enormously dark forces that might just emerge to obliterate all of humanity. It may not be an easy watch for most, but it's exactly that very idea that secures its spot on our list today. Devilman OVAs, 1987 to 1990. It is impossible to talk about Lovecraftian horror anime and not have the Devilman OVAs, 1987's The Birth and 1990's Demon Bird, come up. Adapted from Go Nagai's classic manga, these OVAs don't just regard demons as these scary monsters that we humans need to defend against to survive, but rather as these creatures that have been in existence long before humanity and would continue to live long after we're gone. These creatures had only been asleep for eons, waiting for their chance to rise again, and humanity just happened to be caught in the middle of something that was never really meant for us. And we are, in fact, nothing but pawns in the grand scheme of things. The story follows Akira Fudo, a gentle boy who becomes Devilman when he merges with the powerful demon, Amon, to fight back against other awakened demons. But this liaison comes at a price. Constantly torn between his human side and now with the addition of the violent instincts of the demon in him, it all just takes a toll on Akira. The battle isn't just against the monsters, it's also against the forces within, where questions of identity and morality hang heavy and haunting. Critics and fans praised how the OVAs stayed true to the original manga's darker tone and overall vibe, unlike the later adaptations that leaned more towards the horror and doom aspects. Violence throughout the OVA is pretty graphic. Add to that the haunting music and the brooding atmosphere that is set, and it is sheer Lovecraftian anime goodness. The extreme visuals of gore and dismemberment add to the horror element and make one question just what lies behind the shadows and how merciless this world is. The OVAs have become a cult favorite among the fans of the genre over the years, also because of the way the anime dared to adhere to the darkest aspects of Go Nagai's vision and set the world thinking whether humanity was ever even supposed to be the center of the story to begin with. Violence. Jack, 1986 to 1990. You know what you're in for when the anime already has violence in the name. Violence Jack is one of those anime OVAs that's hard to miss if you're out exploring cosmic horror anime with a smidge of apocalyptic tones. Another one of Go Nagai's stories. The anime unfolds in a Japan that has been hit by a massive earthquake, chaos and mayhem everywhere, civilization reduced to rubble, and the survivors, who are in a pretty bad shape, are left to fend for themselves, with no sign of any help approaching. All that's left is a lawless, post-apocalyptic wasteland where there is nothing but rampant violence and exploitation. Amid this chaos, however, emerges a mysterious figure whose identity is either speculated to be humanity's savior or its biggest doom. Because of the shroud of mystery surrounding this person, Jack, it is also hinted that maybe he is tied to something greater, perhaps humanity's retribution. When it comes to how violent it is as an anime, the answer is a lot, and not just in terms of gore. It contains some very intense, disturbing scenes, including sexual violence, mutilation, and brutality that go far beyond the typical anime of its time. But, like some of the other names we discussed today, the overall feeling of dread that the movie radiates as to how humanity is nothing but the rhythmic background hum in a narrative that far exceeds human comprehension is a thought eerie in itself. Add to that the element of brutality and horror, and you've got the perfect recipe to become a Lovecraftian anime gem. Cyber City, Oedo, 808, 1990 to 1991. From the outside, it may come across as this stylish cyberpunk action series, but beneath its neon lights, the actual existential horror lurks, creeping its way through gritty violence and gnawing unease. Set in a time that's far off in the future, criminals are forced to work as cybercops, along with being fitted with explosive collars that will kill them if they disobey orders or fail missions. To begin with, that in itself tells you just how insane the anime can get. There is only one way to survive: obey the system that's designed to control you. And that's when it is revealed that the futuristic city isn't run by people, but instead by towering networks, supercomputers, and machines that are far more advanced than human understanding. Here, technology has the reins in its hands and is the one that decides who lives, who dies, and who gets to serve it. Again, as we discussed before, the uneasy realization that it is a very likely possibility that the future might hold for us has that true blue Lovecraftian essence to it. Cyber City Oedo 808 earns its place on this list because it presents a kind of horror where free will doesn't exist and your very future is wired against you. Blue Gender, 1999. Blue Gender transports us to a future where Earth no longer feels like home. The planet is now overrun and taken over by monstrous insect-like creatures called the Blue, while humanity struggles to survive in space colonies. Now, if that's not Uno reverse, Lovecraftian anime style, I don't know what is. Humans are now the parasites on the planet we once considered to be the rightful owners of, but now, like guests who have overstayed their welcome, are a threat to be wiped out by the current owners. The premise where we are to exist and fend for our lives in a place we once considered our safe spot, which has now turned hostile, is more horrific than the graphic violence in the anime, with the giant bugs tearing people and limbs apart. Additionally, the story also draws attention to the emotional aspect of survival. Characters are frequently compelled to consider whether retaliation is really necessary, or if people are obstinately holding on to a world that no longer considers them its own. Fans, as well as critics, praise the beautiful melange of raw emotions, action, gore, and the creeping tone of existential dread that's set throughout the anime. In fact, some also compared the It to Western sci-fi films like Starship Troopers and Aliens, but more bleak. Marvelous verdict. And with that, we come to the end of today's video. It's anime like these that remind us that horror doesn't always come from jump scares or gore. Sometimes it creeps up your spine when you realize just how powerless we truly are. Now, the real question is, which of these Lovecraftian anime gems would you be binging on next? Drop your comments below. Hit that subscribe button to join us as we continue exploring anime's strangest, darkest, and most marvelous corners.